today, 11th of August. Any apologies? Just to remind everybody that we've got Bruce and Alan, I see, welcome. Online, so just give me a wave, but if I haven't seen a wave, I'll probably punch up both of you anyway. Unless I get all carried away. Any declarations of interest? Public forum, petitions and deputations, not aware of any. Confirmation of minutes of the 1st of July.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Holmes and Councillor McFarlane. Any corrections, comments? Got that motion in, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried, thank you. No notification of the agenda for exploring business. And I've received your questions. Chairman and Councillors' reports.
I have a question, Madam Chair, and it's just, sorry for the lateness, but I've actually asked this question of Rob earlier on, but I think it would be nice just to record it here, and I don't expect an answer today. The real me accounts, there is some, it's gone out with compliance, and you need to assess a real me account. It's in our minutes from the last meeting, but as a councillor, I don't know what it is, how it works. It seems to be some sort of government identification account, and I'm not sure how it actually links into our work program. So, not necessarily today, but I'd like to get a better understanding of why we're using it and what it actually is.
Yeah. So maybe we could ask for a one-pager from staff. For all council, probably.
Full council need to know, but I just remind me not looking through.
Well, there's a government application program. You get your passport using.
Sorry, so staff, can we just maybe get a one-pager for an upcoming council meeting?
Yeah.
Just that.
Yeah, I've got that to do anyway.
Yeah. Well, I thought I'd just record it here.
Yeah. Well,
the reason I raise it is it's gone out in the compliance letter from compliance to consent holders. It has to do with the visiting of farms and also the person in charge, and I'm not sure how it links. So that was.
Well, if you're asking, then lots of our will be asking. So that's an opportunity to share some useful information with our constituents.
I've got the email and I've had a quick look at it. I've got the email. I had a quick look at it. It's not that hard, Lloyd. Yeah, as Neville said, that it's a way of interacting with the government. There's different levels. I think this is at a low level, so it's not going to require all the complexity of standing in front of a handheld camera and taking movies and moving it back and forth in front of yourself. So it's not that hard, I don't think.
No, but having all councillors have the same and correct information, so that you are asked. Right, thank you. Sorry, right, staff reports. Let's go to item 1, the investment report to 30th of June.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The closing value of the fund at 30 June 2021 was $28.918 million. We, during the year, withdrew $3 million in cash from that. That was in September last year. That was just to help our cash flow position. During the course of the year, the fund grew in value by $3.610 million, so the net increase in the fund of $610,000. It's been an outstanding year from an investment point of view. We earned, for more than 12 months to 30 June, 14.61% in the value of the fund. And in fact, even June had a 2.7% increase in the fund. I've stressed this point before, I know you're all aware of it. This kind of growth is unsustainable, but it has been a stellar year, particularly in terms of equities, international and domestic equities. So do we have, and just in terms of balance, just in terms of July, the good times continuing. The balance of July is gone as 29.065 million, so it's even grown in the month of July. So it's still on a growth trajectory. I'm not an economist, so I wouldn't really want to put my hand in my house and say what's going to happen in the course of this year. Any questions on the investment fund? There'll be no changes in the balance of the fund. It's 50% roughly equities, 50% cash and bonds. Interest in keeping consistent with the cycle, which is the agreed investment strategy.
Thanks. Questions there, Councillor Callum?
Yeah, just along that, we're just on an LTT, so do we look at the SIPO on a regular basis, and if so, is it around about now?
I did a review of the SIPO just in-house. I haven't discussed it obviously with councillors. The feeling from JD Weir is that the investment strategy, in case in the SIPO, is appropriate on an ongoing basis, given the risk tolerance of the council. And so I hadn't planned to do another formal review, but it came out.
And Jeremy, my point was not that it was wrong or right or whatever, but I think this committee probably needs to keep looking at the SIPO and saying, yeah, we're happy with the what it's doing for us, and we don't see any reason to change in the one way, because that's what we criticised earlier on, was we weren't close enough to the SIPO and understood our business going up. So
you point us out, and the SIPO, in the SIPO, talks about a 3-year review of that investment strategy. It is just under 3 years, but I did the in-house review, but it certainly wasn't a formal review. We can take that. I'm perhaps engaged with Jamie Weir.
Well, I suppose, if I may, I was thinking, you've done a review yourself, and it'd be quite good to share it through this committee. And say, look, we've seen what you've done. We don't see any reason why we should be outside of the payments that are here. If we're all comfortable, then we can absolutely fine. Just move through. That was my suggestion.
No, absolutely. I did put a paper to the exec. I can report that to all councillors.
Chairman Hall.
Yes, well, just on that issue, the last time we did change it, we gave some flexibility. It was Debbie Weir's advice. While we do the 3-year thing, I think we've probably got to, if we're happy with 50% split, not to try and micromanage it. We actually hire these guys to do it. They've done a remarkable job in the last 12 months, and I'm not sure where the benchmark comes from, but they have done remarkably well in the last 6 months. So earlier that we had some over and unders, but no, it's very good. And as pointed out, 14.61% is a stellar result. And it isn't sustainable in the long term, but we don't know how long that will run. But it's certainly better than we could do anywhere else at the moment.
Thanks, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you. It's a good time just to point out that when we look at the 29 million, I think it's about year 4 or 5 of our LTP. It's up to about that level, I think, from what I know. That may SIPO, you could actually take the risk out of saying, hey, we're way ahead across totals. If we thought, just trying to protect ourselves going in the future. But then again, this is where I probably challenged the council, because last year we said, well, we'll draw down quite a lot of money, and to be honest, it's always a risk no matter what you put into investments. It's how much of a risk you want to take. And I certainly challenged the point of taking all the money out of the investment fund last year. Would have been a bit better off. Now, it was again, wasn't saying I want it all done, but it's just we need to think a wee bit. This is a conservative position sometimes, that it can be quite rewarding if you challenge the system a wee bit. But then again, I'm in the position now that I'd be conservative. There's just so much unknown on that side, but I thought it may go up. So I mean, it's still good, but then talking about SIPO, can we, if we are ahead by a number of years, we can protect that, take the risk out of it. I'm on that side of things, challenging it going the other way. So I mean, that's just a challenge.
It's a good discussion to have. I'll produce circulate paper and put out, but it does need a discussion we're talking about. So we want to crystallise those gains and reduce our risk profile going forward, or do we want to keep on where we are? I guess my comment would be, if you want to draw on a regular basis, say $3 million out of the fund, if we would just use the risk profile too far towards bonds and fixed interest rate, the bond will, if it's doing for $3 million time, the fund will go backwards. But that's fine. Depends on that's worth a discussion.
Thank you. Bruce or Alan, did you have any question? No, Bruce, yes.
Sorry there, I should get my mute right. Oh, look, I want to thank Jeremy and Lloyd for raising the debate. Look, Chris, I do agree that it would be useful, but I'd want to start from the perspective, what do we need? And I think that was probably the advice that we had from TDB when we first started this process of looking at it, and your comment, Jeremy, that we're probably year 4 or 5 of the LTP, because I was interested to remember where this balance now stands relative to where we were when we started with TDB. So look, Lyndall, I think we need to think about what is it that we need out of this, out of the investment fund or the managed funds, which I presume is a regular line of revenue, and from that I would be driving my look at the SIPO. So look, I sense no great appetite for change, but actually, again, we'll just concur with Lloyd's comments. This is worth a look at, Chris, from the committee perspective, just so that we know that we're happy with the settings that we've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, sorry to come back. That conversation then follows on to, we've talked about, and Jeremy's raised a number of times, capitalising some assets. If we're going to have a look at the SIPO, I'd actually like to see, because my gut feeling may be a little bit different, but I'd actually like to see the impact of capitalising some of those assets. So money goes back in the fund effectively, we're taking out an interest rate which is far lower than their return here. So where does and what happens to cash by doing about it, but I think we need to come back and look at how many of these assets do we capitalise, in other words, fund them and put it as a mechanism, or do we need all? I think we need to have that debate.
So we're looking at a workshop around some of the
yeah, well, there's land for Waituna, there's the shovel ready, there's stuff there that we could use. Some we could capitalise into a loan, and that keeps their cash flows differently. Otherwise, we're running a strategy that's okay, and that may not be the smartest way when they're managing money. So I'm just suggesting that maybe at this early stage we should look at it soon. Yeah, as long as we define the parameters of that workshop, yes. Straight. Right. Anything else from the investment report? No.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you, Mr. Cloud. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2, annual vehicle report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last year, the council approved the purchase of 11 vehicles. Because of COVID and the relative lateness of that decision, no vehicles were bought in the last year. What this paper is doing is seeking the purchase of not 11 vehicles, but 9 vehicles, these replacement vehicles. And you'll see on the schedule there, which of the 9 vehicles are there with us. The council perhaps note that the criteria for replacement vehicles is noted on page 18. This is an updated set of criteria for replacement vehicles. It's reflected in our new motor vehicle policy and is consistent with the government procurement criteria. So we're essentially following that. We dispose of most of our vehicles through the auction process. We have a responsibility to maximise the value or the return on those vehicles that we dispose of. And our general practice is that we use an auction to realise the market value. That's really all I'm wanting to say about this. If there's any questions, really, as I say, it's seeking council's agreement to purchase 9 vehicles during this current financial year.
Questions, Chairman Horrell?
Quite interesting to see the stats. We've actually replacing things a wee bit later or at higher mileages than we used to. Be actually quite good to see, just on a kilometre basis, are we doing better? My gut feeling is probably next year or next 4,000 Ks is probably beneficial with the exercise Sunday. And I know there's flexibility, some of those vehicles are very old, but on the other side of the ledger, haven't done the mileage, but yeah, it would be interesting to know at some stage how that actually is tracked. And I'm assuming we're using something like Turner's to auction. We used to use a Lakewood down here, and our utes used to get a premium if they knew they were ours, because they knew they hadn't done any really hard work.
Then we're moving on to Councillor McAllen. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things here. Nichols' car's not written in here. I don't know whether that's important or not. I see
it is. I think it is.
I didn't see it.
Yep, there.
Read second from the bottom.
Okay, orange line.
There.
There's the second orange line up.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right.
It's got its own special.
All right. So just clarify. So we didn't buy any vehicles last year. Right. I'm still a little bit concerned about the age of some of these. Some of them decks 2012. So I'm expecting if you've missed a year, we're going to have a bit of a catch up or some sort of relook, which is good. I'm just wondering, why are we using hybrids as much as we can? And I'm thinking back to the previous meeting earlier on this morning, but I think and I'm just wondering whether some of the utes, do we actually need the utes to the extent that we've got here? So I'd be interested to understand what they're actually doing.
Yeah, very fair questions. With the advent of E-Road and the data from E-Road, we now have much better visibility on how these vehicles are being used, the duration of journeys and so on. From my perspective, this provides useful information for just that discussion. When we go EVs, we go hybrids. I think anecdotally the argument has been, oh, we need utes because we're off on the farm and we're doing this, that, and the other. But looking at the stats, primarily looking at the stats from E-Road, clearly a lot of the trips are 5Ks, 10Ks around the place. So your comment is pertinent and discussion.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of internal dialogue in that space.
Well, the reason I raised it, Madam Chair, is we personally looked at a electric vehicle in Christchurch, and to cut a long story short, the life of a battery is determined by how you charge it. They demonstrated to us a vehicle that was 2 years old and 25% of its battery life had gone. And that's because it was overcharged and not used correctly. The hybrids, which the vehicle itself charges the battery in the right way, is lasting far better. So I think we've got to be seen to be doing the right thing, and we move as fast as we can. But I think there's some I just like to look at this a little bit fuller, as I've suggested. And because the other thing I didn't see in here was pool vehicles, because every vehicle's got attachment to a department. And I would have expected to say 1 or 2 were lined up, but there was a number of vehicles there sitting in a pool mechanism to be used. And that just means some careful planning. But yeah, I'm probably not seeing what I expected to see, if I'm really honest in that report. I'd like to get a better understanding of that, because I think we could probably run less vehicles if we managed it better. But we've got to have the conversation first, or understand their business first, like you said, and then we move into that second part of the conversation.
Chair, I mean, we are reduced where we haven't increased our big numbers. If you're on back, gone down. We didn't replace last year. So actually, we happy to look at our policy on it. I'm getting a sense that you need more information, and maybe the policy is not quite right.
I don't think it's not a policy thing, Rob, but it's more about how do we utilise the assets we've got, because we're about the same number as last year. 53 last year by memory, 54 somewhere about here.
So what's the right governance conversation on this?
Well, I was going to say that actually part of the problem's not the right word, part of the issue might be just in the way that this is reported to us, because I think that Paul is pretty on top of the E-Rates conversation internally. So maybe this is not what as helpful as it might be now, because we've got 4 vehicles and we've had a change in approach. So maybe looking at how that's reported to us is what we should do rather than a policy discussion. That's my.
We can bring maybe it's kind of useful to bring an E-Rates report to you. And looking at Chris here at this point, saying, actually, here's the data, here's what we're seeing, and here's how it's going to influence our decision making going forward. I
don't think we need all the story. But we do need an E-Rate capture.
I think there are 2 things just from this conversation. First is, do we need as many vehicles as we have? And I can, there's a conversation sitting there, I'm convinced that we need all the vehicles we have. But I don't know to what extent they are. They seem to be dead at certain things. There's a pool vehicle maybe more flexible way to do it and get quicker and get great efficiency. I think about E-Road, as I said, I don't just the number of vehicles, but type of vehicle. I think it's that conversation.
I think I've got Jeremy and Neville.
An element on the screen, I think.
Yeah.
That you've actually, the question I was going to ask is actually the important thing from a politics of the world is that often people, how many vehicles you've got, lots of vehicles, and it's actually it would be good to indicate maybe to the public that we're actually running less vehicles now than what we have. And I mean, so it's there's a good story that can be told as well. From certainly in individuals look at challenging us how many vehicles we have down here. So that's a big thing for my side of things. Yeah. We're heading the right way.
I had a couple of questions I read through. Are we replacing vehicles with like for like? Or are we going out to tender? Are we continuing with 4-wheel drive for catchment for the Med to replace the BT50 there? On the first one's up on the list. It's got 207,000 Ks on it. So are we going to buy another BT50 or are we going to go out to tender and ask dealers to submit?
I can't tell you the exact process they've got for getting prices. As soon as it is into a vehicle, they have been dealing with a lot.
No, I mean, we will be going out usually through a procurement process.
Okay.
And we've got a policy that we'll need to stick to. So, that's given.
Thank you. The other question, because it just says you want to buy some more vehicles, doesn't say what. We've leased some vehicles, the RAV4, which they're all hybrids, I mentioned, those Toyotas. Are we getting a good run into those? Has it proved to be worthwhile so far? I know we haven't had them that long. Should we continue to lease or should we buy? And we come in, if you're going to buy, then you come into a different scenario for the lifetime of the vehicle, that the mileage isn't nearly as important as the battery condition. So if we look at what we're doing there, are we going to get some more EVs? Are we going to lease some more, or are we going to buy some?
My understanding is that we're phasing out the leased vehicles on down the line track. Now, I haven't seen the work, and it's a perennial piece of work that's done, the lease versus buy. Life of the vehicle, so long, we're going to have it in the life chain to do. I can't tell you how recently that might have been done. So I'm sorry, Councillor, I can't really answer your question beyond that.
I'm looking ahead with that question.
So we might need another briefing. Alan, have you got a question still?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Pretty minor, but I just wonder whether we can maybe get another column in there in that table, just to indicate the vehicles that are either hybrids or EVs, just as that gives visibility as to that we are showing interest in putting them on board. I mean, we've got those 3 greyed out leased ones. They are the only at this point. So I just think it might be useful to be able to show over time that we are trending towards non-ICE cars. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's kind of reinforces my point about the way the information is reported to us. need to look at.
Yes.
Nicola, did you still have anything?
Well, it was just, and so it was a while ago, but the lease vehicles, and it was a risk thing at the time. Lease them and see where the value goes. But almost 3 years, and the mileages aren't that high, and but obviously that's something that management will look at as going forward. Do they need to be in a pool or rotated, or are we just better to go out and buy as we have in the past? So it's just, when you look at those numbers, you're thinking, well, it's probably not getting, unless we've got something along the lines that Neville mentioned on mileage wasn't the big thing. They probably aren't doing enough miles to get the benefit of the lease at this stage. So it's small here, it's only 3 vehicles.
So my expectation with Chris is we'll be looking at what's the most cost-effective way of doing this, the lease or buy. And you know, obviously we can report that through to you, actually. So yeah, so I guess the question is, do you want to defer this and come back with more information, or are you happy to approve it and have some further supplementary, maybe a workshop? I want to make sure there's confidence, because I'm just sensing it's a perennial discussion we have. This one around vehicles.
So yes, so just to remind everybody, the first part of the recommendation is to approve the replacement of 9 vehicles in the current financial year, and the other is to note that other vehicle fleet management changes. So we can take this separately if you like.
I'm actually happy to take both of them and take the report as this. I think there is a conversation that grows from this report that we need just to workshop up a little bit. And the reason I say that is when you talk about leased vehicles, there may be other parameters around the leased vehicle arrangements, contractual arrangements, that actually is driving the behaviour that is not necessarily the best interest of us. So if we can take that off the table and look at the best vehicle for this business, then we might have a different conversation. But I'm actually happy, and it's driven really because last year we didn't buy anything. We need to put some in this year. So we don't want to hold that process up, but as we look at it going forward, we'd just like a little more flavour around what's going through there. I don't think there's anything in the policy that needs to be changed as such, but I'd just like to look at how we're actually implementing the policy and how it's playing out.
Jeremy, did you?
Yeah, just quickly, in regards to the government tax on EV vehicles, in due course, where's the consideration for that? I'm just saying, obviously, we're going to a phase where one rebate, if you want to call it.
I think the hybrid I'm getting has dropped significantly since we first looked at it when that's come in.
So I think, sorry, folks, but I think that
I'm just
that conversation in the next round.
I'll second Floyd on approving the recommendations, noting that the discussion today relates the staff to the things that we would like to know additionally in the future.
Was that Bruce putting up his hand, Chair?
Oh, sorry, Bruce. You're only a little square.
I think we're proving to be a bunch of males, aren't we? We all got a view on cars. Can I just ask one question? Look, I agree by the way with the with all the discussion, and I support the idea, Lloyd, that we pass the motion. I actually think what I'd like to see, Chris, if we're going to initiate this, can we get a report back and actually what you've done? I think is even if that's before the workshop, because I think actually that would help us. Can I just check? And it was simply me. I don't know why I did go through the schedule. I noticed under the environmental information there's a couple of utes there, 2016, both of the age, and I would have thought in terms of numbers, the way you've done the other ones are due for replacement as well. So the other ones are under the. If you look at environmental information, there are 2 due for replacement. Why are the ones, if I've got it correct, that follow underneath were JYF 145 and 146, which have a remarkably similar kilometres. It's amazing actually how they look almost twins. Why are they not being replaced?
I can't answer that specifically, Bruce. I know the 9 vehicles they're asking for is per the long-term plan. They're part of the capital replacement in the long-term plan. The replacement of the other vehicles and the timing of those, I can't speak to that just at this
I'll leave it as an open question, Chris. I appreciate that, but it just seemed I was only looking at what was the test or the trigger for replacement, and it seemed that those two were eligible. But honestly, but I'm not. As I say, we've dragged this one out. I suspect. I just pose that as a question. I know what might be in the LTP, but if you look at the performances here, these two look like they should be replaced as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Right, so we've got a recommendation on the table, moved by Councillor McGowan, seconded by Councillor Cobb. All those in favour, say aye. Next. Thank you. What's the request for a workshop/report? Thank you. Right, moving swiftly on. Item 3, the long-term plan progress report. And here's one. The winner. This is the final quarter from the last long-term plan, and I tend to have the same narrative whenever I speak to at this meeting, particularly in the last year. So just to reiterate that there are a range of AMBER responses in this report. As you've shadowed in the last quarterly report, that we would expect to see those carry through because the measures that we foreshadowed earlier in the year that were unlikely to be met, primarily because the measures related to matters which, as an organisation, we did not have direct control over. They related to the performance of other organisations, and in some cases with measures relating to outcomes in the region rather than a level of service that we were providing as an organisation. So nothing has changed for the majority of those AMBERs. However, in this last quarter, there are two new AMBER responses, and they are the level of service number 6 related to minimising environment, economy, and community. Team relates to the time it's taken to get response to the jobs for nature work up and running, primarily around communication and administrative support at the back end. So the reporting there was, I think, paced about 88% rather than 100%, which was the target of that work completed. So that's rolled forward into this financial year, but it's primarily met, which is why it's not red. And the other was an AMBER on level of service number 11 in relation to the work program for Whakamana Te Waituna. And again, the report is just related to the fact that as the financial year is getting close, that work program is still rolling forward. And my assessment of that is that relates primarily to, I think, the fact that the appointment of the incoming executive director has just been established and there's been a change of staff. So, yeah, so it's not a long way behind, it's been green in all quarters, but it's just a reality of the change of staff. So the incoming level of service, you will note from the LGP change quite significantly in terms of the targets. Next one, question, Mr. McKellen.
From a take out the reporting side of this long-term plan, is there any area of concern that you have going forward that we need to be aware of? In other words, some of the stuff is around how you report, and you can argue that the target was too high and we didn't get it because you can't get 100% on some of the stuff. So take that off the table. Going forward, is the stuff sitting here that we should be putting some energy into or thinking about that needs to be action? In other words, I'm saying that the work program is running behind physically and we need to make sure that it catches up over the next 12 months.
So for example, if we look at, say, the air indicators, because it's one that we report constantly and we don't meet, I think that's a good example of where the work program is dependent on the national environmental standards that have been coming to us from central government. And so it is definitely a good example of where the level of service is never going to be met because we are reporting against doing something that we're waiting for government to actually do. So that level of service for the incoming LTP, of the year that we're in now, relates to our ability to deliver on the requirements of whatever these is. So I think that quite a few of these
really relate to the way we've chosen to articulate our reporting framework. So with AIR, yes, to a certain extent, the work program is behind, but it's behind because we're waiting on the National Environmental Standard. There are aspects, though, in this coming LTP where we're actually going to be able to advance parts of this work, and we've said so, and how we're going to measure that. So there's a bit of both in there. But I don't really feel that there's any, that this is indicating that the work program is not happening. There are also just strange aspects of setting targets that went outside the LTP timeframe here. So there was set for 2022 and 2023 and 2025, and looking at how we section what we're doing in terms of reporting across a 3-year period. We're reporting that things are amber because we haven't done things that are yet to be finalised. And so are we really behind in our work program for things that are designed for 2023? I'm not certain that we're necessarily indicating that that's the case. So in the narrative, we're saying we're still intending to meet those target dates. It's just the phasing isn't fitting the quarterly reporting. So I feel that, enhanced reporting, which is the purpose of the new strategy group that's been created in the structural change, means that the quality of the reporting, I'm hoping, over time will be a lot better and a lot more detailed around the indicators that demonstrate whether we're doing a quality job or not. And I'm hoping to see this a lift in our reporting game over the next LTP. Any other questions?
Fantastic.
I'd like to wear a magic wand and have it perfect now. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So, recommendation here, text,
Second.
General, or have this tonight? Yes. Gary, thank you. Right, and item 4 is the annual activity plan.
Chair, we'll find the proposed activity report timetable in the pack. You'll note that the dates for 2022 have not yet been set. That will be done. I have one particular point I want to raise around the activity plan. Questions on that afterwards. And they received a draft annual report at the risk meeting on the 23rd of September, and the final annual report on the 17th of November. In the timetable that I have on my wall, it shows 28th of October, the adoption of the final annual report. So this is a discrepancy if you walk between that and the timings here. The government in 5th of August last year passed legislation that provided for a 2-month delay in the finalising of annual reports, principally because of the lack of audit resource within the country and starting through COVID and so on. I've spoken to our auditors about our timetable and advised that the 29th of October is when we were looking to adopt the final annual report. For that, the audit, of course, would need to have been completed. The auditors have requested, if you, the councillors, would countenance a 1-month delay in the time, as we did last year, a 1-month delay in provision of our annual report to you with its final audit opinion. So I'm proposing the adoption of the annual report to move to the end of November, as opposed to the end of October, which is the current timetable provides. The auditor, Mike Hawkins, said to me that if your strong preference is to stick with that timetable for the 29th of October, which is the time that he has, he said they could make it work. But it was a request that we do consider a 1-month delay in terms of his timetable.
General.
I can't see any risk to the organisation and being a month later. It gives more time to make sure that it's done properly. I would certainly support that.
Thank you. That's important.
Yeah, I support that. I'm not too worried about a month away as long as it's done properly. Can I just go to the activity timetable. CapEx report was meant to be this time.
There is a brief in the financial.
It's a tiny little
capital expenditure report on page 55.
Okay. And what about on page 42 down the bottom? I'm not too sure if we're hitting them, and some of them are in 2020. It's due March 2020. The triennial agreement, iwi contributions. Are we on target with those things? So it look like we're getting outside of the fund manager review due 20. Should we do that? Or it's actually ticked for 2021. We're feeling about through 2021 now.
Bunch of things that keep getting kicked down the
and the
road.
sidepose there as well. So I'm just wondering whether I'm suggesting that we should tidy up some of those frameworks. Because it reads as if we're not hitting those targets at the moment.
Page 42.
It's on the forward planning to be developed.
We just asked that we need to match the lost that current lost.
So, through Chair, Chris, just a bit of catch up. To the
So there's a few things there that have been, and there's nothing still under the contributions adjustments. That's been missing from the so we might just need to sit.
But I'm not sure what that relates to you. I mean, the processes are all in place for that, and then this is all done. So
I'm not sure what's on the list.
Right, actually, just doing it right now.
Yeah, so I suppose my question really is, regardless of what's happening at the management to management level, it looks like we have some sort of governance oversight or check on that. That's what it looks like to me. And it doesn't look like that's coming through.
Yeah.
And we're going to be, well, we're August now. We've only got a couple of meetings left, so.
Sit down and match those up.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else about the activity plan? Ellen? And then Bruce.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So my question relates to, obviously in the table here, we're showing the financial report as something that we're going to see in this meeting. And I'm concerned that we're not also showing the debtors review for this meeting. So I know we've got some reports for this meeting, however, that they are in public excluded. And so my question really to staff is why are those two reports in public excluded? Particularly also if we're not going to now disclose our full year result for the 2021 year until well into the back end of this year, we are being a little bit not as transparent perhaps as we could be with how last year has gone.
Councillor Baird, I think the reason for the financial report coming into public excluded is because the timing of closure of GL and the requirement to meet this meeting's timetable is this financial report is a draft report. The debtors and rates report I would have been happy to have in the public arena, public excluded, but that's the rationale for giving the financial report into this. Not for want of transparency, but just because the limited time we had to prepare these reports.
And just following on from Chris's comments, I think the debtors one, there's been a feeling around maybe the debtors list is somewhat sensitive to some people. And as we work through it in the past, it hasn't been something council might have had in the public arena. It might change.
Well, and actually the style of the debtors report is different this time than it its previous iterations. So perhaps the new format will be more suitable for in public.
So when are we going to give an indication to the community as to how 2021 went? Are we going to show an indication in the next meeting, or at what stage are we going to show a draft report? Because again, in November, we're not scheduled to talk about 2021, we're talking about first quarter of 22.
There's a draft annual report scheduled to be presented at the 23rd of September risk meeting.
I see that, sorry. Thank you.
List all those, isn't it?
So the recommendation is to write a report, but being aware that the annual will be a month later. Understood? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Right. That concludes the public part of this afternoon's meeting. Just hear the reasons for moving into public exclusion.
To carry on with that process of disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for the gain or advantage, and to protect the privacy of natural persons, including their assistants.
Thank you. Somebody like to move that?
I'll move.
All